I guess the first interactive fiction game proper that I've discovered was the Zork series, and it was on an Australian machine called a Eureka A4 that ran CPM, and it had no screen, had a braille keyboard, and spoke with an Aussie accent. So, it'd go on like this: you're in a room, passage going north and south, and you just typed in what you wanted to do, and it would let you do it. And I guess that was in maybe late 80s, late 88, 89-ish. And that was fantastic for me, discovering those, because they fill in all kinds of gaps. If you play something like Zork, everything is described, and sighted people don't always do that. So you not only get a sense of place and how places work and how you move through them, but you also get a sense of objects. You can examine, it's pretty much everything you can pick up in that game, and it'll have a description. So it's very helpful in terms of, filling in little blanks that you might have missed as a blind person. These games have been really good at a lot of things, but that's one of them, and of course typing speed. Well, a lot of course, places are more so like learning about, for instance, haunted theater. I played that in university, and I never would have realized that so much, location was involved. So many different areas were involved in an old style movie theater. So that was an interesting game for me in terms of that. And then, of course, with the Jigsaw. That's another game where, again, history, like the Titanic, being on the Titanic, and you'd walk around and go to the deck in time to catch the iceberg colliding with the deck, and it was a lot of things like that really make you start to realize just how large. I never really had a proper sense of just the scale of the Titanic until I played Jigsaw and wandered through it. Jigsaw is definitely one. Graham Nelson's epic history tour there. That just made you face so many ethical conundrums and so many different eras in history that it brought history to life in a way that reading books in class never really did. And I think that's a fantastic thing that he did there for me and any other blind person who would play that, or anyone who just can't get into the past, really get into history. It's a fantastic gateway to the 20th century. Haunted Theater was another great one, great for beginners. And the hint system, I played it where I could actually use that, and I had to use it a few times to solve a few of the puzzles, but that one really, it probably cost me marks in university. I played it right around Halloween, and a couple of tests, incidentally, and probably lost marks on those tests because I was playing nonstop for about 2 weeks solving that one. I'd like to see more randomness. I'm a big stickler for that. In terms of the one drawback to the really good interactive fiction is once you've done it once, it's solved for keeps. Like, you can go through it back sometime in the future and maybe find a couple alternate things, a couple alternate endings, a few things like that, a few puzzles to solve different ways perhaps, but in general, you're slogging through territory you've slogged through before. And I would really love to see something more like Beyond Zork. That's sort of a hybrid interactive fiction role-playing game that Infocom did, and I think they really did that well. You had the sense of a plot. There was a linear plot that you had to go through, but you could approach things. You could choose to do this before that. You could sort of there was space where you didn't feel caged in, and the results were random because you go into these places, and within certain boundaries, randomness was possible. Things showed up in different places from game to game, and that really appealed to me. It's still one of my favorite games, Beyond Zork. That was just a super treat to adventure like that and really have a sense of the actual unknown. It's not completely scripted, even by the author. You really had a powerful sense of that, and I'd love to see that in more games, in actual combat, actual modeled statistical randomness where things might happen that won't happen in every game, even, and things like that. That would be just wonderful. And I came into it with kind of, puzzle as if, I don't know. But it really did its job well, and I was quite moved by the story in that game. It really did that. You could just go from place to place, from narrative to narrative, and it was just a real treat to go through. So it has its place. I'm generally more akin to the puzzle fests. I tend to do a little less well with interaction with the non-player characters and things. But yeah, it was still very, very interesting when it's done right. There was one guy, Ken Downey, who did a game called World of Darkness, where he took a sighted person who, sort of the old theme of some sighted bully gets sort of blinded and shown, what things were like, and he tried to do that. I played some of it. I wasn't really all that impressed with that. Other than that, I haven't really encountered. I've encountered games where you've, of course, been going around in the dark, of course. But other than that, like to actually do a game from a blind person's point of view, I haven't really encountered that too much. I really liked in Jigsaw. There was absolutely no very distinct characteristics. You really had to project yourself and really are directly faced with what would I do given this situation. And that can be a real powerful thing. But I don't mind playing games where you're a sorcerer and you have all these different spells, or sometimes you'll do things that maybe in real life you wouldn't do. I don't find that as jarring. I just take it all in game context. I like some of the puzzles. I'm not always great at doing them. Sometimes it takes me months or even years. Jigsaw took me 2 years to win. I just didn't know enough about history in a lot of cases, or the sayings and things connected, like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as one example. But yeah, I like mainly the really well-written characters, like Delusions. Had some really excellent lines. I used to have a collection file with quotes from all the adventures I was playing at the time, and I wish I kept updating that, because there have been some fantastic, really powerful pieces of text in the middle of a lot of these games. If it's a really good story, then yeah, that's fantastic too. It's really, and it has to be both. I love a game with, if the story can really carry it, that's okay. But if there are going to be a lot of puzzles, I want a really good story backing them up. A nifty ending, a nifty plot to go through and work towards to really give that motivation. In terms of encouraging reading, the act of reading, and not just wanting everything spelled out in sound and sight for you, interactive fiction is fantastic for that. I've always been an advocate of the imagination, particularly for blind people just getting their feet wet in computers and access technology. They can be really daunted, and it can just look like, why am I learning this if all I can do is read and write with it, and that's just going to open the gateway to a bunch of work that I'm not going to enjoy. And I often really push for trainers and people to use interactive fiction, because it's a fun way of doing precisely like that. Like I learned, basically I was 10 years old when I got my first computer game, and that was a Great Escape, not genuine interactive fiction, but as I went on, I got more text adventures, and you learned how to type. I could type about 90 words a minute by the time I got to basically late junior high. And that was basically because I'd played text adventures. I didn't have to take typing classes. I could goof off in typing classes. I didn't even have to think about typing, because those games taught you, if you wanted the story to move faster, you had to do the finger work to make it move faster. But other than that, I can't see any subject that you couldn't approach with interactive fiction. It might be harder to approach it, as well or as hard-hittingly as you could with just a straight narrative. But I can't see any real showstoppers in that regard. The best writing in the world is not going to save a game from the real big programming blunders. I've unfortunately encountered that too. So you really have to be both. You really do have to be a jack of all trades. And oftentimes the programmer who can work these games, isn't as creative as, say, a writer would be with ideas and arcs of story. But that again is another sort of bottlenecking thing that you find in interactive fiction works. It demands so many skills from what I find very diametrically opposed areas. It's very seldom that you find someone like a Graham Nelson or a Daniel Yu who did Spirit Rack. There's another fairly open game for you that could really do both writing and the programming to a really good level. Yeah, it was all about games that were either accidentally or intentionally accessible to blind people. And a lot of those text adventures were accidentally accessible. And that was where it all started, really. And then the sound-based games gradually came in and basically pushed interactive fiction down quite a ways. But it's still there. It's never completely lost its place. Definitely text adventures are a good place to start because they'll help the kid with his keyboarding and learning how to use his access technology, particularly to review the screen if you miss something. And it's very important that you hear the whole entry after you hit the enter key to hear what to do next. So if you missed the odd word and things like that, you can go back and review it. So it's very a natural way, probably the most natural way that is possible to expose a kid to something that will get him or her in things that will, it'll make them pay attention to what they're hearing or feeling if you're doing it with a braille display, and really just make them naturally want to get better and quicker at typing, at reading and navigating the screen. And they won't even realize that they're learning really valuable skills because they're having so much fun while they're doing it. That's what happened to me. That's what made me as good with typing and with using access technology and understanding the ins and outs of the screen review features of whatever system I've used at the time. And that's what did it, interactive fiction. I tend to think that hints should only be used when pleasure is not in jeopardy being lost, right? Like if you're really stuck on some puzzle and you're just at a point, where you're not going to get it. Like I would have killed for someone to have just told me, you just have to move the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic to get the book, Boy's Book of the Sea, that helps you solve the later sequence of that chapter in Jigsaw. But I just couldn't figure it out. I just searched the whole bloody ship time after time, and that's a loss of entertainment. You're frustrated with the thing. You're not gaining any pleasure from being absolutely irretrievably stuck. And that's where walkthroughs and hints are justified, I think. If it's a choice between loss of time needlessly and loss of pleasure, then get the hint and move on to where you're going to enjoy the roast of the game. There's always going to be parts in any game where the jump between author's mind and player's mind is just going to demand more telepathy than is in you. So, at least in my experience, I'm not the best interactive fiction player. I just happen to like it. So I'll run into these situations like that where it's not going to do me any good to stew over something for weeks. I may as well get a nudge, a hint, something to keep me moving. I think including hints is a really good idea. A lot of authors won't put that extra effort in to do that, so you'll leave players stranded without really a middle ground. Sooner or later a walkthrough will appear, but then you are already losing audience because how committed are you to solving this game as a player? Will you actually go through the work of finding and retrieving and looking at the walkthrough, or is it just screw it, I'll just walk away? And that's the real test of a game's staying power and pulling power. Will it pull you through that kind of extra effort, extra research, extra work, essentially, to continue to play, to continue to go forward and seeing where it leads? I think people, I've often heard it said that people don't want to keep staring at a computer to play games. They just can't make the jump from work machine to fun machine. And then if they do, then it becomes, well, okay, if it's just text, then I have to read everything, and then I have to, what I'll point out to them is that is, the imagination is such a wasted thing in today's world, such a devalued thing in a lot of ways, unfortunately, especially to these people who are all caught up in their working lives. It can really do you a lot of good just to sit down and have a medium like text adventures where you have to read along. You have to imagine the trolls, the dragons, the Titanic, and really put yourself into it. And for me, anyway, given the choice, sure, I'd love to experience a good sonic game that was fully done in fully 3D audio surround sound and left nothing to the imagination, that would be fun in and of itself. But there's a lot to be said for just hearing that voice, in my case, whichever one I choose, narrate a game, and just putting the pieces in place, putting the different voices to the characters, putting the sounds in the background, the ambience, the atmosphere, the feeling, the sense, and just filling in all that yourself with your imagination. Nice to know that we can still do that we haven't been completely robbed of that ability. Yeah, it's almost what is left unsaid, unrevealed. In a lot of cases, you don't know exactly what that dragon would look like, and I never would anyway. But to have that gap where you fill in your conception of a dragon, it will be your ultimate dragon, your ultimate experience. It'll be different for everyone who plays it, and that adds even more to the discussion. If you see these works discussed and things, or talk about them with your peers who have also played them. I used to get in high school, I'd have my computer in the cafeteria, and I was the only one who walked around not only with pencils but with 100+ games that they could just play anytime. Very strong temptation, let me tell you. But you'd have a group of 6, 7 people sitting around arguing about what to do next to solve the mystery or smite the demon or whatever. It was a lot of fun, and I think it added something to their lives to do something that didn't require, in fact, that you couldn't use sight to participate in. It more depends on what I'm in the mood to hear. Like, there's a really good American voice that I like. I use more for novel reading, and then there's this voice that I just acquired that I'm fairly pleased with. I'll probably use it, but it's still new to me. They're the voice where they have a couple of Kate and Paul voices that are quite good. Probably a couple of the best out there, other than this new British one that I've just discovered. And apparently with the new Jaws that my wife's getting, that comes with a good 6 or 7 other really good English quality voices, American, Australian, and British. So I'm looking forward to experimenting with that. It does. I'll associate a voice with a game, like Jigsaw, for example. I have my the old Jaws voice is what sticks in my mind for that game, because that's how I played it. That's how I conquered it. So even if I play it again with this new voice, it won't quite feel the same, as it did with that old inferior voice by in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also the whole thing that people have visually, where the fonts get smoother and look better over time, but you can't help but feel an emotional attachment when you think back to when
what
the
it was
fonts
like
were rough.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Flickery and glowy, and they weren't the same quality, and now things, as you can imagine, just like they've done with the sound, the visuals are smooth. So
sometimes that's irretrievable in our case. Like for me with the Eureka, where I first played the Zork and actually conquered Zorks 1 through 3 and Spellbreaker, that really sticks out in my mind with the Eureka voice, an Australian woman speaking. So I'll never get that experience of playing with that voice again. It's lost now. It's an artifact of access technology history. I wish I had this much earlier. Really use this in university.
Mm-hmm.
But just like the encyclopedia that was accessible, I just found out about it after I graduated. Blind campers, well, more like a lodge. It's not really a day camp or anything, although they have that for certain weeks. But yeah, it's great to be able to actually order the pop you want from a pop machine that has Braille on it. It's a real treat. One guy from Real Magic, something like Ritual Entertainment. He did a bunch of podcasts about developing a game, action shooter, and he was going through how they had to manufacture all the gun sounds, because real gun sounds, they just don't work out if you record them just as is, right, for some reason, which I wouldn't have figured. But kind of, I always had a sense that they were, of course, fake in the movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
With great effort, you opened the window far enough to allow entry. Behind house score. 0 move. W. Kitchen. You are in the kitchen of the White House. A table seems to have been used recently for the preparation of food. A passage leads to the west and a dark staircase can be seen leading upward. To the east is a small window which is open. On the table is an elongated brown sack, smelling of hot peppers. A bottle is sitting on the table. The glass bottle contains a quantity of water. Kitchen score. 10 moves. 5.
Begin. Our doom is sealed. Gale turned away from the window overlooking the great sea. The guildmaster nears the end of his final quest, she said softly. When he succeeds, for succeed he will, our power shall cease to be. The silence wasn't broken for a long minute. Then a tiny voice near the door peeped. Forever? No. The old woman leaned forward on her staff. The age of science will endure long. No one in this room can hope to outlive it. But our knowledge need not die with us, if we act at once to preserve our priceless heritage. Wherein lies your hope, Gale? Demanded a salamander in the front row. What magic is proof against the death of magic itself? Gale's dry chuckle. What? Random. The word random isn't in the vocabulary that you can... You take stock of your possessions. You're wearing a pack. You have one Zorkmud. A financial nymph appears on your keyboard. By the way, you can check the amount of cash you're holding at any time with the cash command. Or, just type $1 followed by return. Bye. She disappears with a wink. W. The hillside is too steep that way. NW. Edge of storms. Edge of storms 9 at 8A 69. 7 at $30%. And 1 gray fields extend. Mode. Normal display mode. Edge of storms. Gray fields extend to the west as far as you can see. Under a sky black with thunderclouds. A billboard stands in a patch of weeds. Frank Boot EN. Get weed with a modest tug. A limp weed pops out of the ground. Say, hilltop. A stunted oak tree shades the inland road. Frank Boot. You amble down the hill. Cove. Go circle the far end of a wharf extending east across the cove. The street is dotted with Chevys bleached by years of sun and salt. Frank Boot EN. 16th Street. 08DX. 08IQ. 08CM. 01LK. 25AC. 00 Cove exits. NESW.
wow, that's a badly random generated character.